الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, from next week we're going to just go forwards or backwards by 15 minutes. Inshallah, we'll start at 8:45. That's just to account for the fact that Maghrib is getting a little bit earlier and we're going to end up with a very short class. So inshallah ta'ala, from next week we will start at 8:45 inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so we'll continue bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Bismillah.
قال المصنف رحمه الله يقول في توحيد الله معتقدين بتوفيق الله إن الله واحد لا شريك له ولا شيء مثله ولا شيء يعجزه ولا إله غيره.
So we concluded last lesson with the statement of Al-Imam At-Tahawiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, Inna Allah wahidun la sharika lah. Allah is one and He has no partner. And we talked about the fact that this relates to being one in 2 or 3 different ways. It relates to being one in terms of Allah's lordship and the actions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. Allah is the creator and the sustainer and the provider, the one who causes life and the one who causes death. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one in His names and attributes, so nobody has any of His names and none of His attributes, they're only for Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one in deserving to be worshipped, and the fact that no one is rightfully worshipped except Him. And we set a small task, I don't know if anyone had time to think about it, to think about the ayat which gather together all of these different types in a single ayah. And we gave an example of ayah number 65 in Surah Maryam, رَبُّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا فَاعْبُدْهُ وَاصْطَبِرْ لِعِبَادَتِهِ هَلْ تَعْلَمُ لَهُ سَمِيًّا. Lord of the heavens and the earth and whatever is between them, so worship Him and be consistent in worshipping Him. Do you know anyone who is similar to Him? So Lord of the heavens and the earth, this talks about Allah's lordship. So worship Him, this talks about Allah's worship. Do you know anything that is similar to Him in His names? هَلْ تَعْلَمُ لَهُ سَمِيًّا. Do you know anyone who is similar to Him in His names and attributes? This talks about Allah being one in His names and attributes. There are many other ayat that we could have talked about. Does anyone have any thoughts, any ayat come to mind? There are many ayat. Surah Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamd is an act of worship that is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ar-Rabb, it refers to the lordship of Allah Azza wa Jal, and it's one of His names and His attributes. And the fact that we worship Him is because He is Rabbul Alameen and He has the perfect names and attributes, of which include Maliki Yawmiddin, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, and so on. So Surah Al-Fatiha, definitely. Likewise, we can add to that Ayatul Kursi. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum, which also indicates or gathers together between worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone and affirming for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala His names and attributes and affirming the lordship of Allah Azza wa Jal. There are many ayat in the Quran, many ahadith in the Sunnah that gather all of these things together. And in fact, if you go through any passage or any part of the Quran, you're going to see many times. Also, if we expand it to join between 2 sets of ayat, and we say that whenever an ayah talks about Allah's lordship, it's immediately followed up by a command to worship Him. For example, Ya ayyuhan nasu u'budu rabbakum. That's another example of one ayah which joins all the points together. O mankind, worship your Lord. So it talks about the lordship of Allah, it talks about Allah's names and attributes, and it talks about worshipping Him. But after saying to worship your Lord, and talking about Allah creating you, الَّذِي خَلَقَكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Immediately after Allah talks about creating mankind, the next ayah, at the end of the next ayah, فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. Don't make any partners with Allah in worship while you know. More than one of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, when they came to this ayah, while you know, they said, while you know that Allah is the one who created you, and you know that Allah is the one who sustains you, and so on. You know these things about Allah, that Allah mentioned He created you and He sent down rain from the sky and He provided you with fruits. You know this about Allah, so don't worship anyone else besides Him. And that's a summary of what Al-Imam At-Tahawiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala said when he said, Inna Allah wahidun la sharika lah. He has no partner, not in His lordship, nor does He have any partner in His names or His attributes, and He doesn't have any partner in being deserving of worship. No doubt many people worship other than Allah. If you look in the world today, many people worship other things besides Allah. But only Allah Azza wa Jal is deserving of worship. All of those things that they worship besides Allah, they are al-batil, they are the falsehood. And only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-haq, the truth, the one that deserves to be worshipped in truth. The author, he said, Inna Allah wahidun la sharika lah wa la shay'a mithlu. There is nothing like Him. And here, the author, he alludes to the fact that we negate from Allah, or we don't accept any tamthil as it relates to Allah, any mithl, any comparing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to His creation, whether that be His creation from Bani Adam or any of His other creation, no matter how great, no matter even the greatest of angels or even the arsh, which is the greatest of the makhluqat, the greatest of Allah's creation. We don't compare Allah Azza wa Jal to His creation in any way. And this use of the word tamthil, we're going to come back to it in the next part of the text, because there's an important distinction between at-tamthil wa at-tashbih, which the author is going to talk about. What is the difference between at-tamthil and at-tashbih? But here what we want to say is that there is nothing that is comparable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any of His names and attributes and actions. So whatever we hear about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say that there is nothing about that which is similar to His creation or comparable to His creation. And there are many ayat, one of which the author is going to mention. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing like Him, and He is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. And likewise, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. There is nothing which is comparable or similar or comparable or any kind of partner to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So la sharika lah, if we take the two parts together, is more, or indicates, even though it can cover all of the three meanings, when he mentions it in a single sentence, it indicates more that there is no partner with Him in His lordship and His worship, particularly in His worship. وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُ. This is more specific to the names and attributes, that there is nothing equal or comparable or similar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah Azza wa Jal is distinct from His creation. وَلَا شَيْءَ يُعْجِزُ. And there is nothing that escapes Him. And the reason there is nothing that escapes Allah Azza wa Jal is for two reasons: the perfection of His knowledge and the perfection of His power. And when these two things come together, that is when nothing can escape Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of these two things coming together. Kamalul ilm wa kamalul qudrah. Complete knowledge and complete power, or complete ability to do anything. And that is because Allah Azza wa Jal, nothing can escape His knowledge. So there is nothing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't know about. Allah Azza wa Jal knows everything, past, present, future, the possible, the impossible, what it would have been like if it was different. Allah Azza wa Jal knows all of that. And likewise, it is possible for a person to know something but not be able to act on that knowledge. One of us, we might know something, but we can't act upon that knowledge. Or we might be able to act, we might have the strength to do something, but we don't know how to do it, or we don't know where that particular person is. As for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ. There's nothing similar or equal to Him. Allah Azza wa Jal's knowledge has encompassed everything, and His power has encompassed everything. So because Allah Azza wa Jal is بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٍ, He knows everything. And because Allah Azza wa Jal is عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٍ, He's able to do all things, then as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, or as Allah Azza wa Jal told us in the Quran, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُعْجِزَهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing that can escape Allah فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَلَا فِي الْأَرْضِ إِنَّهُ كَانَ عَلِيمًا قَدِيرًا. And this is in Surah Fatir. There is nothing that can escape Allah in the heavens or the earth. Indeed, He is all-knowing and all-powerful. And the ayah itself explains, the latter part of the ayah explains the first part. Because Allah Azza wa Jal has complete knowledge, and because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has complete power, then there is nothing that can escape Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the heavens or in the earth. وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ. And here is a very specific statement, لا إله إلا الله. And this statement, لا إله غيره, that there is nothing deserving of worship but Him. This is kalimat al-tawheed, the word of tawheed. And remember that Imam At-Tahawiyyah, he's explaining what Al-Imam Abu Hanifa and his two students, Abu Yusuf and Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, rahimahumullah, what they said about the tawheed of Allah, about the oneness of Allah. Because he said at the beginning, نَقُولُ فِي تَوْحِيدِ اللَّهِ. This is what we say about the oneness of Allah. And he finished that first sentence, وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ, that there is nothing that is worthy of worship. And here, al-ilah, and this is really important we understand this, that the word ilah in the Quran is used for something that is worshipped. It is used for something that is worshipped. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He told us in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is فِي السَّمَاءِ إِلَهٌ وَفِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَهٌ. That Allah is the ilah in the heavens and the ilah on the earth. And the meaning of ilah is al-ma'bud, the one that is worshipped. The one that is worshipped. And so when we say La ilaha illallah, we are saying that there is nothing that deserves to be worshipped except Allah. And it's very important that we're not saying that there is no creator except Allah. Because this saying that there is no creator except Allah is something obvious which most of mankind did not argue or disagree about. Even the majority of Christians, very few, will claim to you that Jesus created the heavens and the earth, or that Isa created the heavens and the earth, alayhi salam. This issue of there not being a creator except Allah, this is something that the vast majority of mankind agreed upon, and only a tiny number of people, only a very small percentage of people argued about there being a creator besides Allah. But the argument that was between the prophets and their people was about there being an object of worship besides Allah. And that is the meaning of al-ilah. And that's whenever you read the Quran, you can see, whenever you come across the Quran, and you come across the word ilah in the Quran, it's very clear that the word ilah, it means something that is worshipped. So Allah Azza wa Jal is the object of worship in the heavens and the object of worship on the earth. It's also important that when we say, La ilaha illallah, we understand that there's a word missing which is understood from the context of the sentence. And that is that there is no God deserving or worthy of worship. Because if we said there is nothing which is worshipped except Allah, this statement is false, because there are many, many things that are worshipped besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People worship the sun and the moon, and they worship statues, and they worship prophets, and they worship angels, and they worship the living, and they worship the dead, they worship the graves, they worship the stars, they worship trees, they worship stones. People worship all kinds of things. So the taqdeer, or the understanding of the sentence, is that there is la ilaha bihaqqin wa la ilaha haqqan illallah, that there is no God deserving of worship. And here the word that we understand from this is deserving. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that is deserving of worship.
قال المصنف رحمه الله قديم بلا ابتداء دائم بلا انتهاء لا يفنى ولا يبيد ولا يكون إلا ما يريد.
The author, he said, قديم بلا ابتداء. Now he used the word qadim for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is the first time that we're going to be a little bit critical of his choice of words, rahimahullah ta'ala, because Allah Azza wa Jal never described himself with the word qadim. However, what the author is saying is correct, because he put a condition and he said qadimun bila ibtida, that Allah is ancient without any beginning. But the word qadim, which means ancient, it could mean something that has a beginning, and it could mean something that doesn't have a beginning. So it could mean something that has always existed, and it could mean something that came into existence a very long time ago. It's very, very old. The word qadim could be used for either. It could be used for something that has had no beginning, and it could also be used for something that has a beginning, but that beginning was a very long time ago. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never used the word qadim for himself, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never used the word qadim for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when he said qadimun bila ibtida, that Allah is qadim but he has no beginning, he made it clear the meaning that he wanted. He made it clear that the meaning of qadim was not qadim as in something which started a long time ago, but it has a beginning. Because he said bila ibtida, it has no beginning, that he has no beginning. So what he said was correct. But it would have been better if he had said, rahimahullah ta'ala, awwalun bila ibtida, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-awwal, and he has no beginning. Because that's what Allah says about himself. Huwa al-awwalu wal-akhiru wal-zahiru wal-batin. He is al-awwal, and he is al-akhir, and he is al-zahir, and he is al-batin. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained what those mean. He said, Allahumma anta al-awwal falaysa qablaka shay. O Allah, you are the first, there was nothing before you. وَأَنْتَ الْآخِرُ فَلَيْسَ بَعْدَكَ شَيْءٍ. And you are the last, and there is nothing after you. وَأَنْتَ الظَّاهِرُ فَلَيْسَ فَوْقَكَ شَيْءٍ. And you are al-Zahir, so there is nothing above you. And the highest, the most high, or the most apparent. وَأَنْتَ الْبَاطِنُ فَلَيْسَ دُونَكَ شَيْءٍ. And you are al-batin, and there is nothing closer than you. And there's nothing closer than Allah in His knowledge and His power, and so on. So this is the meaning of those names, and that's the meaning that Allah spoke about Himself with. Huwa al-awwalu wal-akhir. So we think it would have been more appropriate to have said, instead of saying qadimun bila ibtida, to have said awwalun bila ibtida, that Allah is al-awwal and He has no beginning. However, the meaning that Imam At-Tahawiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned is correct, because when he said bila ibtida, he made it clear his intended meaning when he said qadim. And he made it clear that when I say qadim, I don't mean that Allah is very old, I mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning. And he made that clear from his statement. So his statement is correct, but it's better that we don't speak about Allah with something that He didn't speak about Himself with. And the only people really to use the word qadim for Allah were the philosophers and the people who took for them. Generally, Ahl Sunnah, they use the word al-awwal, and they don't use the word al-qadim. قديم بلا ابتداء. He is the first who has no beginning. دائم بلا انتهاء. Again, he used the word daim instead of the name of Allah al-Akhir. He used daim, that Allah will be forever. بلا انتهاء. And again, the fact that he said بلا انتهاء, it made it clear what it is that he meant. That Allah Azza wa Jal is everlasting and there will be no end. And there is no time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cease or will end. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, أنت الحي الذي لا يموت والجن والإنس يموتون. You are al-Hayy, the ever living that will never die, and jinn and men will die. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is al-Akhir, the last, and there is nothing after Him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never cease, bila intiha, without any ending. And the person here may ask a question and say, how is it then that the believers will have everlasting life in paradise? How will the believers have everlasting life in paradise? We say that when we say about Allah Azza wa Jal bila intiha, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no end, and that this is only for Allah Azza wa Jal, the meaning is this is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala istiqlalan, in of Himself. As for what Allah wills to have no end because He sustains it, then this is excluded from that. There is no comparison between the two. Because Allah Azza wa Jal has no end in of Himself, by Himself. As for paradise, it has no end because Allah continues to sustain it. And if Allah stopped sustaining it, then it would end. As for Allah Azza wa Jal, He doesn't need anyone to sustain Him. And therefore, He has no end in of Himself. As for paradise and hellfire, they have no end, but they have no end because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees that and sustains them for eternity. So there is no similarity between the two. As we said, وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ. There is nothing that is like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَا يَفْنَى وَلَا يَبِيدُ. Here, the author, he mentions and he emphasizes his statement, دائم بلا انتهاء, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the everlasting and will have no end, by saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not cease and will not perish. And that is taken from the ayah, كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. Everything that is on the earth will perish. It is fan, it will perish. But Allah Azza wa Jal la yafna, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not perish. And the face of your Lord, Dhul Jalali wal Ikram, full of majesty and honor, will remain. And we mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who will remain in of Himself. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause to remain whatever He wills from His creation and will sustain them for whatever He wills. وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا يُرِيدُ. He said, and nothing happens except what Allah wants. Now here again, the statement of Imam At-Tahawiyyah is correct. Is correct. However, it is open to, or it needs a little more precision in the explanation. Yarhamakallah. It needs a little bit more precision in the explanation. Because here he said, nothing happens except for what Allah wants. And the word he used is yurid. But when we look at the word yurid in the Quran, we see that actually that it refers to one of two things, and the two things are different. So there is something that we call mashi'ah, or will. Allah wills. Like when we say insha'Allah. The sha here, the word it comes, or the word that we take from the verb is mashi'ah. Mashi'ah always refers to what Allah Azza wa Jal wills. Insha'Allah, if Allah wills. The other word that we find used in the Quran is mahabba, what Allah loves. Inna Allah yuhibbu at-tawwabin wa yuhibbu al-mutatahhirin. Allah loves the people who turn to Him in repentance, and Allah loves the people who purify themselves. Here, the word yurid is sometimes used for what Allah wills and sometimes used for what Allah loves. And the two are very, very different. The two are very, very different. Now, what Imam At-Tahawiyyah said here is perfectly correct because he's using it in a particular context. But when we explain, we have to explain both so you know the difference and you don't become confused. That the word wants is sometimes used for wills and sometimes used for loves. The word wants, Allah wants. Sometimes what Allah wants is what Allah wills, and sometimes what Allah wants is what Allah loves. And if you look in the Quran, you see the words being used differently. So what Allah Azza wa Jal wills always happens. What Allah Azza wa Jal wills always happens. As for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, He may will it to happen and He may not will it to happen. So if we think of will and love as being two circles that join in the middle. On the left hand side, you have things that Allah wills, but He doesn't love. On the right hand side, you have things that Allah loves, but He doesn't will. And in the middle, you have things that Allah loves and wills. So if you draw two circles that they cross over, they intertwine with each other. Then on one side, you have what Allah wills. On the other side, you have what Allah loves, and in the middle, you have what He loves and He wills. So Allah Azza wa Jal only loves that which is good. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't love disbelief. Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَلَا يَرْضَى لِعِبَادِهِ الْكُفْرِ. Allah is not content for His slaves to disbelieve. Allah doesn't love for His slaves to disbelieve. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْكَافِرِينَ. Allah doesn't love the disbelievers. However, Allah Azza wa Jal sometimes wills things to happen even if He doesn't love them. So He might will for a person to disbelieve. He might will for a person to disbelieve even when He doesn't love for that to happen. Because Allah only loves for good things. But He wills what He loves and He wills what He doesn't love. So there may be something Allah loves and He doesn't will. It never happens. For example, the iman of Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl becoming a Muslim. Allah loves it. But it never happened. Allah didn't will it to happen. And then you have something that Allah Azza wa Jal, He doesn't love it and He didn't will it to happen. Like the disbelief of Abu Bakr. Allah didn't love it and Allah didn't will it, so it didn't happen. And then you have something that Allah loves and He wills. Like the iman of Abu Bakr. Allah loved Abu Bakr to have iman and Allah willed Abu Bakr to have iman. And so it happened and Allah loved it. Allah only loves what He is pleased with and what He commands you to do in His sharia. The acts of worship that He loves. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. But the question comes, why does Allah Azza wa Jal will things that He doesn't love? Why would Allah will Abu Jahl to disbelieve when Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't love any of His servants to disbelieve? وَلَا يَرْضَى لِعِبَادِهِ الْكُفْرِ. Allah is not content, not pleased for any of His servants to disbelieve. And the answer is Allah Azza wa Jal said, حِكْمَةٌ بَالِغَةٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has infinite wisdom and perfect wisdom. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has infinite justice. وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. Your Lord is not oppressive at all to any of His servants. What this tells us is that out of Allah's justice and out of Allah's wisdom, He sometimes decrees things to happen that He doesn't love. Now, why did we come to this? Because He said, وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا يُرِيدُ. Nothing happens except what He wants. The word wants in the Quran is sometimes used for loves and sometimes used for wills. And I'm going to give you an example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, فَمَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَهْدِيَهُ يَشْرَحْ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ. وَمَنْ يُرِدَ أَنْ يُضِلَّهُ يَجْعَلْ صَدْرَهُ ضَيِّقًا حَرَجًا كَأَنَّمَا يَصَّعَّدُ فِي السَّمَاءِ. Surah Al-An'am, ayah number 125. Whoever Allah wants to guide, He opens his heart to Islam. And whoever Allah wants to misguide, He makes his chest restricted and He makes it in a state of hardship and difficulty as though it was being propelled through the sky. What kind of want is mentioned here? Is it the will or the love? Whoever Allah wants to guide, He opens his heart to Islam, and whoever Allah wants to misguide, He makes his heart, or He makes his chest restricted. Is the want here what Allah wills or what Allah loves? Mashi'ah, what Allah wills. Because first of all, you have two things. Ask yourself the simple question, did it happen or not? If it happened, then what it's talking about is what Allah Azza wa Jal willed. Because whatever Allah wills happens. Al-Imam al-Shafi'i said, مَا شِئْتَ كَانَ وَإِن لَمْ أَشَأْ وَمَا شِئْتُ إِن لَمْ تَشَأْ لَمْ يَكُنْ خَلَقْتَ الْعِبَادَ عَلَى مَا عَلِمْتَ وَفِي الْعِلْمِ يَجْرِي الْفَتَى وَالْمُسِنُ على ذا مننت وهذا خذلت وهذا أعنت وذا لم تعن فمنهم شقي ومنهم سعيد ومنهم قبيح ومنهم حسن. Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in his poetry, he said, whatever I will, now notice he's used the word will here, whatever I will, he said, whatever you will be, even if I don't will it. And whatever I will, if you don't will it, will not happen. You created the servants because of what you know, and in your knowledge runs the young and the old. This one I blessed, and this one you blessed, and this one you disgraced, and this one you helped, and that one you didn't. Among them are the wretched, and among them are the happy, and among them are the ugly, and among them are the beautiful. So here, the will here is one that happened. And the other clue you have in the ayah is that Allah talked about misguidance. And misguidance is never what Allah loves. Whoever Allah wants to misguide. So in the ayah here in Surah Al-An'am, the word want, it means will. So in the ayah here, want equals will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Baqarah, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. Allah wants ease for you and He doesn't want difficulty. Now here it depends on how we look at it, but if we say that this covers all of the matters in a person's life, then this refers to what Allah loves. Allah wants things to be easy for you and doesn't want things to be difficult. Allah loves things to be easy for you and doesn't love things to be difficult. Sometimes things are difficult, right? Sometimes Allah wills for something to be difficult for you. But Allah Azza wa Jal only loves for things to be easy. However, if you refer that to this to be the rulings of Allah Azza wa Jal, then that is a different understanding here. Because then if you talk about the rulings of Allah, all the rulings of Allah are ease in reality. That's how Allah Azza wa Jal decreed them to be. So here, when Imam At-Tahawiyyah he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا يُرِيد, what he means is, وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا يَشَاءُ. Nothing happens except what he wills. So he's used want to mean will. It's very important, it's a very important point, and it's a point that a lot of people don't pay attention to, because if you don't distinguish between what Allah loves and between what Allah wills, you can't answer the question of why bad things happen. And ultimately, that road, if you go down it and you don't distinguish between those two things, it leads to you basically taking two gods, a God of good and a God of evil. Because if you say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only decrees what He loves, then who decrees what Allah doesn't love? Who decreed for all these people outside to disbelieve? And who decreed for the situation the Muslims are in today? And who decreed for all of the hardships we go through? If you say that Allah only decrees what He loves, then you're left to say that there is another God besides Allah who decreed the things that you don't love. That's not correct. Rather, we should say that Allah Azza wa Jal decrees what He wills. Sometimes that's what He loves, and sometimes that's what He doesn't love. And there are many evidences for this in the Quran, but I'll give you a very simple one. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. Say, I seek refuge from the Lord of the daybreak, from the evil that He created. Very quickly, we'll just do the last sentence, inshallah. Just shout. When the adhan time comes, give me a shout, inshallah.
قال المصنف رحمه الله لا تبلغه الأوهام ولا تدركه الأفهام ولا يشبه الأنام.
نعم. حي لا يموت.
حتى حي لا يموت قيوم لا ينام.
That's enough. He said, لا تبلغه الأوهام ولا تدركه الأفهام ولا يشبه الأنام حي لا يموت قيوم لا ينام. The first sentence that he said, لا تبلغه الأوهام ولا تدركه الأفهام. This is a very important point from multiple angles. First of all, we cannot encompass Allah Azza wa Jal with our knowledge. Our intellect and our knowledge can't encompass Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِهِ عِلْمًا. They can't encompass Him with their knowledge. And so this has multiple benefits in it when He said that the intellect, it can't reach Him. The minds can't reach Him, and the intellects can't understand Him. It tells us that the intellect plays no part in knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know Allah through the wahi, through the revelation, through what Allah said about Himself and what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about Him. And in reality, all the people who were deviant in the names and attributes of Allah did so because they used their intellect instead of using what Allah said about Himself and what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about Him. And so whatever group you look at, whether you look from the very beginning of Ja'd ibn Dirham and Jahm ibn Safwan, and then onwards into the Mu'tazila and these different groups, and the Ash'ari and the Maturidi, and all those who follow them, all of them are unanimous in a single principle. And that is taqdeemul aqli ala naql, that the intellect is superior to the revelation. And it takes precedence over the revelation. And when you don't understand something about Allah, it's your mind that decides what's right and wrong, and not the Quran that decides what's right and wrong. And only Ahlul Sunnah in this stayed separate and said, what decides what is right or wrong to say about Allah is not the intellect, but it's the Quran and the Sunnah. What Allah said about Himself and what the Prophet ﷺ said about Him. You can't reach Allah with your intellect. You can't use your mind and think and think and think and come to a correct understanding about how Allah is or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. The second point that we take from this is to negate and reject at-takyif, which is to ask how Allah does something. We had already said that the author has spoken about at-tamthil when he said وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ, there is nothing comparable to Him. Here the author is also negating at-takyif, Allah being similar, or asking how Allah is. How is Allah? How does Allah do this? How does Allah see? How does Allah hear? How does Allah rise? How does Allah speak? This is something you can't know. Why can't you know it? لا تبلغه الأوهام ولا تدركه الأفهام. Because your mind and your understanding and your brain and your intellect cannot reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever you imagine about Allah Azza wa Jal, Allahu Akbar, Allah is greater than that. Whatever you try to picture or think about or put into your head, you will always be inventing a lie against Allah Azza wa Jal. And so, that is why when a man came to Al-Imam Malik and he said, how does Allah rise over His throne? Al-Imam Malik, he said, Al-istiwa'u ghayru majhul wal-kayfu ghayru ma'qul wal-imanu bihi wajib was-su'alu anhu bid'ah. He said, the meaning of rising is not unknown. We know what it means. How Allah does it is not understandable. غَيْرُ مَعْقُول. Our aql can't reach it. Our intellect, our mind can't reach how Allah does something. Believing in it is wajib, and asking about it is an innovation, asking how. So there are two important points we take from this. One is that the aql has no place in the names and attributes of Allah. It's not that you think about, oh, do I think that Allah speaks or Allah doesn't speak? Let me have a think about that. It's not your job to think. It's your job to see, did Allah say it in the Quran? Did the Prophet ﷺ say it in the Sunnah? That's all you need. And also it negates asking how Allah is. How did Allah do? How does Allah? How is Allah? How can Allah? That question can never be answered by us. Allah knows it about Himself because Allah knows everything. Allah knows how He speaks and how He rises and how He sees and how He hears. But nobody knows that except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Ahlul Sunnah, we affirm the meanings of Allah's names, but we don't ask about how. We ask them, we know the meaning, what the meaning, each name has a meaning, but we don't ask how. And the last point I wanted to cover, وَلَا يُشْبِهُ الْأَنَامِ. Here, the author changes his use of words. He said earlier, وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ. There is nothing comparable to him, and he used the words mithl. But here he used the word tashbih. And many of the scholars of old, they used the word tashbih, but the word tamthil is better than the word tashbih. And I'm going to explain a number of reasons why. They both have similar meanings. Ash-shabah is something resembling, which resembles. He said, وَلَا يُشْبِهُ الْأَنَامِ. He doesn't resemble mankind. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't resemble mankind. But the word resemblance here is perfectly fine, and many of the early generations used it, but the more accurate word would be comparison. There is no comparison with mankind. It's better than saying no resemblance, and that's for a number of reasons. First of all, Allah Azza wa Jal never used the word resemblance when He was speaking about the fact that there is no comparison between Him and His creation. He used the word mithl and the word kuf. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أحد. And He said, وَلَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing similar to Him. But He didn't use the word ash-shaba or at-tashbih. Allah Azza wa Jal didn't use it. That's the first reason. And the second thing is that you can't deny resemblance 100%. What you can say is there is no resemblance between Allah Azza wa Jal and His creation except in the core meaning of the word. But in the core meaning, there is a resemblance. For example, if I say Allah Azza wa Jal has knowledge and a human being has knowledge, there is knowledge and knowledge. Allah's knowledge is nothing like the knowledge of that human being, and the knowledge of that human being is nothing like Allah. But there is a common meaning that is shared between the two, and from that point of view, you can't negate resemblance across the board absolutely 100%. But what you can say is that there is no resemblance in how Allah Azza wa Jal does it. There is no resemblance in it in a general sense between Allah and His creation, and there is no comparison between how Allah is and how His creation is. But there is a resemblance in the meaning or the core meaning, what we call aslul ma'na, the core that the meaning has. Knowledge and knowledge as a meaning, the meaning of knowledge and the meaning of knowledge. Like what does the word actually mean in English or in Arabic? Al-ilmu wal-ilm. The two have a commonality, which is the basic meaning of the word, knowing something. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows and mankind knows, but Allah's knowledge is not like their knowledge, and their knowledge is not like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if He say la yushbihul anam is perfectly acceptable, but we prefer to use the word at-tamthil, that there is nothing, laysa kamithlihi shay, there is nothing like Him. Hayyun la yamut, qayyumun la yanam, and we'll finish with that Allah Azza wa Jal is al-hayy, and Allah Azza wa Jal is al-qayyum. And there are a couple of points we want to take from this statement. First of all of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal come back to these two names. All of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal that are names relating to His Dhat, Himself, like His knowledge and His life and so on, all of these that relate to Allah Himself, they all come back to the name Al-Hayy. And all of the names that relate to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does things towards His creation, like blessing them and giving them mercy and bestowing on them and providing for them, all of them come back to Al-Qayyum. And notice here that the author affirms the meaning. So he says, Hayyun la yamut. He is ever living and he doesn't die. And here he joined, or he made a point that our belief is different to the belief of those people who say Allah is Al-Hayy, but we don't know what it means. Or Allah is Al-Hayy, but we don't say that Allah is alive. Rather, we say Allah is Al-Hayy, la yamut. He is Al-Hayy, and that means that he doesn't die. And the last thing we take from this is whenever you say something negative about Allah, you must always bring the positive as well. So we don't just say about Allah, la yamut, wa la yadhlim, Allah isn't unjust and he doesn't die, wa la yanam, and then stop. We have to also affirm the perfect opposite for Allah. Hayyun la yamut, qayyumun la yanam. Al-Qayyum refers to the fact that Allah is sustaining his creation. So in himself, everything connected to Allah can be summarized with the name Al-Hayy. And everything connected to Allah's creation can be summarized with the name Al-Qayyum, that Allah sustains his creation. And that's why Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala and others, they used to consider Al-Hayy al-Qayyum to be Allah's greatest name. And others, they said the greatest name of Allah is Allah. And others said that there is not one name, but a group of names that are the greatest name of Allah Azza wa Jal. And inshallah ta'ala we'll stop there, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.